Well, my other video got totally destroyed. But I just had this waking dream. And I saw back in the Middle Ages the women in the kitchens. And not many of them were well dressed, even though they worked in castles and what were castles, making bread mainly. It was different. They all gathered there because it was warm. And even their daughters from early ages were in the kitchen. Most of the sons were in the field, except a few. And women back then were very wise. Well, they weren't. They were brutal, to be honest. Most of them, I mean, well, they pretty much cycled together. And so men would leave during that period. And they were all together. But they also knew how to poison other men and women that they didn't like. And they did often. They would poison other women or make them miscarry and blame it on just whatever. They would poison men who hurt young women. And the other women knew that they were poisoning them. Of course, they were taught from an early age about herbs and stuff. Since most of the deaths occurred from things like scurvy and vitamin C deficiencies and vitamin D and A deficiencies, they learned herbal magic and herbal remedies to supplement vitamin C so they could make it through. Many places didn't have um, fruits that had vitamin C in them, and they were wise. They experimented, and some people died. She's telling me all this. And some of the men, not many, but some, caught on to them. Mostly monks in the first place. But monks then got smart, and they would use the little boys that were working in the field to help them in their shops or in their studies. Either they would have them doing calligraphy or making candles for them, and they would teach them. And they didn't teach them to be monks, they taught them to be farmers. And, not that I know this firsthand, mind you, and the other farmers were wise then. And women stopped cycling together once they got to a certain stage and they moved away from the family. And men would see them and watch them cooking. And they knew enough from the monks about herbal medicine, even though the monks had to be very secretive about who they taught. I just can see it all. And some women actually didn't mind that their husbands, for what they had done to other women, were being poisoned. And they would sit idly by and watch. But some of the men got onto it. And they were like, they would give their food to the women to eat. Some of the noblemen, and of course women would not dare to refuse at that time, you know, so they would eat it. But they had enough wherewithal to know what the antidotes were, because they were taught in court from an early age from other women, you know. Not that she wants me to tell you all of this. And I was trying to figure out, well, I know the herbs from a long time ago from studying. Um, and animals knew at that time. And I was thinking about the herbs that they would use that were rich in vitamin C and vitamin D. The other reason they didn't had vitamin D deficiency and were probably a little bit upset with other women, they were inside all the time cooking, you know. And they all gathered in the kitchen because it was warm and there was light there, having no windows to speak of for the most part. The light from the fires kept them warm. And making bread back then was not an easy chore, you know, as anyone can imagine, making homemade bread from scratch, from wheat and whatever they had, meal, and not easy. I mean, you'd grind it and then, you know, some of that work was not trusted to others. I mean, women were like, no, no, that is, and maybe that's a different world. But I know that the monks were very secretive about, they would say that they were using the children, the boys, to help them make candles or run errands, but they were secretly teaching them. And then men would go in the field and talk to other men about, you know, don't eat that. No, you know. And I just made food and I was like, this is what they used to eat a lot of times is bean stale bread with stale cheese or hard cheese and some, butterfat type thing on it. It was very easy to eat that all the time, and it was very good. Um, I mean, they'd eat it most of the time, and they kept well in some monasteries they kept salt pork or salted meats, and so they would make it through the winter with that. Another source of well, I wouldn't even say that one. It's true though. I know my other video got totally destroyed of you know the wreath making. I hung it up on the. I suppose I could show you, but you know, I made pictures of it. I sent one to Deborah, one to Sean. I'm still looking back in there. In some areas, too, well, of course, they didn't have very many mice because, or rats. Well, they had feral cats all over the place. And of course, they were well taken care of because of their role in keeping everything clean. And so they listened. Not that animals were passing on secrets to each other. Not that anyone would believe that animals communicate in different ways than humans do. We're not going to set the fire alarm off. So, anyways, got sidetracked. Yeah, and so it wasn't unusual for women to have grudges against other women within the castles and within the communities. And they did poison each other. And they did know if somebody slept with the wrong man, and was pregnant, they were easily well within, at that time, they thought it was their right to poison them. And not to kill them, but to make them miscarry. I can see it like it's like, you know. But then again, women always knew how to do that. In almost they were wise. So, and some of them still practiced it, in states that didn't allow legalized abortion. They practiced, like, well, they did. They're medicinal plants that animals knew too. When they were sick they knew what to eat. And I don't know, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this. It's a lot of information, but I remember studying it once. Oh, and I, you I never used that on anybody, but I remember studying it once because I thought, you know, if I ever had a friend or a need, that I would like, you know. Well, in those days too, women were, it was different. And, you know, at young ages, they had children. Young. I mean, even, not that's wrong. I mean, I don't believe in that. But that's what they did back then. And then laws changed. Um, I mean, I can see it like it was happening. I can see inside this one kitchen, and it's just, and there was a lot of times where it was in complete silence, you know, or if they did talk, it was to the younger women to like order them around. The older women rarely talked unless they were giving orders, and of course, you never talked to them unless you were asked to. I mean, it was like, you know, and so it was very different in those ages. And like I said, the men got wise to it. And a lot of times the church persecuted them. Well, of course, women had an in with the church. Because in those times, well, the church married women into wealthy families. And they could manipulate much of what was going on in the church just by their weddings and their dowries and their being in positions of power. Not that I'm not saying any of that's wrong. It just was a different time. And so many times they would go there secretly to, well, of course, they would go there to see the men, the man of that castle. But secretly they would meet with the women since they knew that they were the ones in charge at that time. And it was strange because they had to meet in secret with representatives from the church. And it was almost like they were sneaking around. Well, because they often had messages from their other family members married into different families. And the church was a great envoy for getting those messages secretly to them. Not that this maybe isn't supposed to be said. I feel obligated to tell someone. Not that I was there, somehow, or seeing it in my mind. You know, I don't read history. So, you know, I don't really think I took one history class. But I'm like, I can see this stuff happening. Like, and it was these, you know, weird meetings. And it was mainly about what was going on in other people's homes. Oh, I gotta stop now.